in there. But we are pleased to welcome to the studio Michael McGill, candidate for Mississippi's 4th Congressional District. Michael, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so have you ever run for political office before?
Nope, this is my first time.
So what persuaded you? What was your motivation to jump in this race?
Well, it's a complicated thing, but I guess it's the best place to tell you. So I just retired from the Army about 8 months ago. So I did 20 years in the United States Army. My family runs a nonprofit. We've been doing it for about 15 years, and we just kind of always been helping people and, being part of our community. Me and my son one day were feeding some of the community, and we're just like, we could do better. Like, how can we do what we're doing now, but on a much greater scale? And that's when it came to, it was like, we need to rewrite the laws. We need to focus on people at the congressional level. And I was kind of like, okay, we got to run for Congress.
Okay. So, of course, you would be running for the seat currently held by Representative Mike Ezell. He's a first-termer. Yep. How would you contrast your philosophy and your approach to governance and how you would just conduct yourself differently as a member of the Congress than Representative Ezell?
So I think the most important thing for us to do as a congressman is represent all people. There's so many people in our district, and then I think that not everybody's getting represented equally throughout the entire district. So that's something that I would do better at. I would be communicating consistently with voters and never leaving them uninformed. I would be the one that would work into all communities, no matter where they vote, if they're Democrat or Republican. I think that I bring a fresh perspective to Mississippi by being a 43-year-old combat veteran, someone that has served in our government and understands how the intricacies of our government works, and understand that the things we could do a lot better. I just think that I bring a younger perspective to the Republican Party and different things that we could do to just make South Mississippi a better place to live with representation.
I've reviewed some of your policy issues and your positions on your website there. What do you see as your priorities should you be fortunate to be seated in the U.S. House of Representatives?
So really, it's so hard to say what one's a product because Mississippi needs so much. But human trafficking, Mississippi ranks number 10 in human trafficking. It's the second most lucrative crime in the United States, drugs than human trafficking. But it's also children. 1 in 5 children go to bed hungry in Mississippi. That's a lot. And then so these are the things that I would prioritize, is making sure that Americans get what they need to have a basic opportunity at life. I think when we reinforce Americans and give them what they need, they do become more productive for our country. So just taking care of people that need a hand up, and that's not, I'm not talking about money. I'm just talking about giving them the resources that are already there so that we can provide all Americans an opportunity.
Okay, so talking about 1 in 5 children that go to bed hungry in the state of Mississippi, any particular policies that you're thinking about that might alleviate that issue?
Well, the policies are already in place. They're already here. We just got to reinforce them. So, for example, we just did the school lunch programs. We just stopped paying that during the COVID era. We fed the children for 2 years during the summer vacations, so that the kids could eat, and that's vital to them. So just continuing those programs and reinforce money that we're spending overseas and our own people would give those children an opportunity to be better educated and things like that. That's just a simple way to look at that.
Okay. Polls indicate, Michael, that most Americans have deep concerns about our porous borders.
Yes. And
that they think the border should be shut down, or certainly we should gain greater control over it and stop the flow. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the American people are right. I don't think it takes 20 years in the military to see the situation that's happening to our country right now. Me personally, I would love to shut down the border. I think it's important that we use our military resources and our federal resources to shut the border down and start working on and creating a better streamlined policy for it. I spent 4 years on the North Korean border holding a rifle, guarding it. I've spent time on the Syrian border. I've spent time being these border protectors that we have today. So if anybody understands what it's like to protect a border, it's me. And I get where everybody's coming from. I understand and I feel the same way. We cannot continue doing what we're doing. But at the same time, I do believe there's a place for immigration reform in the United States.
Second on the list, sometimes first, depends on which poll you look at, or just economic issues, the cost of living, inflation out of control, et cetera? What are your thoughts about that?
I think that where we're getting a lot of our issues when it comes to inflation is out of control spending. We give so much money overseas, but we don't give it back to our own people. So I think if we could stop spending so much money on other people and we spend it on Americans, I think that would help us reduce inflation and stop the random printing of money. I think there's a lot we could work on our infrastructure. If we would reinforce our infrastructure, that would open up better ports. We're working on the Gulfport Harbor, things like that would allow for better commerce to come and reduce the inflation rates.
Okay, so you're well aware that we are producing stiff deficits, about $2 trillion a year. We're currently at $34 trillion in debt. The projections are that trend is going to continue. $2 trillion to balance the budget. If you thought about what a budget might look like that you could support that would in fact be balanced, that'd be the first question. Second question is, we're about to run out of money again March 1st. Looks like we're set to probably pass another kick it down the road to continuing resolution. How do you think you'd vote on those situations?
So I was listening to one of your other guest on the other day that had the same question, and the thing is, like, I think we should stop spending more money than we make. But if we are going to have to build the deficit, spend it on Americans. If you invest in our own people. That's the only way I would vote for growing the deficit, if it's to invest in education, infrastructure, our power grids, making sure China's not buying our farmlands. That I'm willing to invest in for the long haul. But I think that if we stop giving money to foreign aid, NATO, the United Nations, we give so much money, but we still become the world's police. So we're basically doing it twice. We should send the United Nations a bill saying, hey, we spent $190 billion. We're going to go ahead and retract that back from you. And I think we would change that a little bit. Once that started happening, money would change a little bit.
Okay. Of course, that falls well short of the $2 trillion we need to balance the budget.
And
it's kind of a drop in the bucket.
Yeah,
honestly.
And honestly, it's just going to be good conservative, investment in our own country. I don't think if anybody was to try to tell you they could fix the budget tomorrow, they're just trying to get your vote.
Yeah.
I think that we have to create policies to start reducing that debt. And it's going to take time. It's going to take many people to do it. But as long as there's an election cycle about to happen, they're going to push it down the road until they get elected. And that's an issue. Is they're not putting our country first. They're not putting the voter first. They're putting their platforms first so that they can stay relevant when it's time to be elected.
If you're elected, you're going to face another situation where you'll have to decide how you'll vote on raising the debt ceiling. How do you think you'd vote on that?
I wouldn't, like I said earlier, I would not vote to raise the debt ceiling unless it was to pay for children to have lunch. Something like that. If it's to invest in Americans that will come back with an investment into our country, I could see that. But just to, if we're investing in highways, infrastructure, our power grids, that I can support.
Okay. So is it fair to say then, Michael, that if a budget were presented to you or a debt ceiling bill were presented to you and it does not include any spending that is not domestic, that
Correct.
If any of that spending that goes outside of the borders, you wouldn't support it, but if it is totally domestic, you would?
Yes, sir, because, I think our country has invested in so many nations for so long that those nations have now got comfortable asking us for money, but we forget that we're the ones getting left behind our own country. I think Americans have such a huge heart that we want to help Israel. We want to help Ukraine, and we see the investment in it. Okay. But sometimes we forget that our children and our wives and our students and all this, they need the same type of support that we're giving other countries.
You talk about on your website homelessness to address that situation with support programs. What would that look like?
So a lot of the programs that are happening in the United States, 50% are ran by nonprofits. The other half is the government spending. And that's the issue. If we would allow the nonprofits to control that, they know how to stretch a dime. If we allow our government to try to take care of a problem, they can't. They'll take the money and just waste it. But when it comes to a nonprofit that has a very balanced budget, they know what they need to do. So what we could do is reinforce those nonprofits with better money that we were going to spend and allow them to do it. But when it comes to homelessness Homelessness is just a byproduct of something much more complicated. Mental health is what starts it. Mental health leads into drugs. Drugs leads into homelessness. So we can't just start at the bottom. We got to go into something much more complicated, like mental health, and start focusing on that if we want to tackle drugs.
All right. Well, best of luck to you. March the 12th.
March 12th, sir. Yes,
right
sir.
around the corner.
Yep. And if there's anything they need from me, they can get it from my website, stayamerican.org, and just kind of get information. Please reach out to me. I'd love to just be the guy that people are looking for, just a normal candidate.
Appreciate you coming in. Michael McGill, candidate for Mississippi's 4th Congressional District, has been our guest on Middays. We're coming right back in the Element Well studio. It's Joel Carter, Mississippi State Senator, at 11:05.